Hello and welcome to episode 79 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. Today's show is going to be an important one because it just keeps getting more and more complicated to plan a Walt Disney World or Disneyland vacation. Transportation from the airport, park pass reservations, restaurant reservations, boarding groups, lightning lanes, Genie Plus, and so many other confusing changes have all made the process a mess for people who don't spend all of their time keeping up to date on the parks. Sarah Says and I are going to get you started with the process of planning a Disney vacation in this new world. Before that, you know I have to plug my fundraiser for Casa of Pinellas County, Florida. In June, I completed a pilgrimage across Ireland on the National Famine Way. On Monday, you were able to see the very first vlog in my series from the Emerald Isle. I'll be debuting brand new vlogs from the trail every Monday until I finish my hike in downtown Dublin at the Great Famine Memorial. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel to get updates on those videos and to see all the fantastic videos we have from the theme parks. Well, one of the reasons I chose Ireland for my pilgrimage to raise money and awareness in the fight against domestic violence is my grandfather on my mother's side of the family. We just called him Pop. Growing up with an abusive father, Pop was one of the positive and non-toxic role models I had to emulate, so I wasn't stuck with my abusive father as the only example of how to be a man. Pop's family came from County Donegal in Ireland. Well, this Monday, the day we will air the second vlog from Ireland, also marks Pop's 100th birthday. He passed away over a decade ago, but celebrating his birthday is very important to me. Pop had 5 daughters and was so respectful towards women while also handling his business. He always had the shiniest car on the block and the most well-manicured lawn. When it would snow, he walked up and down the entire block in the wee hours of the morning and cleared off everybody's driveway. He truly was a great man, and I know he would have been so proud of what I have accomplished and what we're trying to accomplish for survivors of domestic abuse. Let's pay tribute not just to Pop, but to all of the strong men in our lives who aren't toxic, by donating $10 to Casa of Pinellas County this week. This is his 100th birthday, so it only takes 10 people donating $10 for us to raise $100 that will go directly to Casa for their use immediately. Honestly, with the number of people we've had listening to the podcast over the past few months, we should be able to get way more than 10 $10 donations. We should easily be able to raise $1,000 this week. Let's do it. The link to donate is casapinellas.org/walkwithrick/. That's casapinellas.org/walkwithrick/. Every single dollar goes directly to Casa. In the past 2 weeks, I learned an entirely new video editing software to use these vlogs to promote the fundraiser. I sat down for an interview with Lauren from Radio St. Pete in Pinellas County, Florida, to talk about everything I'm doing to help survivors. I'm scheduled to do another interview with the Hiking Through Life podcast to spread the word. You can't say I haven't been putting in the legwork, both literally and figuratively. Please consider donating $10 today. Now it's time to welcome Sarah Says back to the show. Thanks for being here, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Today is going to be the first time on the show that we actually return to a topic we have discussed before, but so many things have changed that we thought it was a good time to do another episode about starting the process of planning a Walt Disney World vacation. Things are changing each and every day, it seems almost, in how you plan a Walt Disney World vacation. So we thought we would just go through the process of starting to plan for a trip. This actually came about because of one of your friends, Sarah, who was planning a Disneyland vacation, and you were thinking about how many ins and outs there were when she was trying to plan it for her family.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot to think about because they have a child who's close to the same age as my son. So yeah, it really is interesting to like get back to thinking of like, oh my gosh, like there's a lot of things that you have to think about before you put that money down, right?
So we're going to be focused on Walt Disney World, but there's probably going to be a time where we do the same thing for Disneyland, and we might do one for Universal Orlando Resort as well. But today we are focused on Walt Disney World in Florida, and the first thing we have to talk about is length of stay. How long are you going to have to stay to make this vacation worth it? So obviously, the first consideration is money. It is expensive to go to any of the Disney parks, especially Walt Disney World, and your number one consideration is going to be the bank account.
No, absolutely. And it's true, especially, with a lot of people who have either been out of work or not working as much due to the pandemic. The first thing exactly is you're going to look and be like, the prices seem to have gone up quite a bit from maybe the last time I was there. I mean, the last time I was at Walt Disney World was 8 years ago now, and it was significantly less expensive to go for a week or so than it is now.
So there are some times that we can talk about these things and it will sound like we're telling you to spend a lot of money. I think in the case of Walt Disney World, if you can't go for at least a work week, I don't think it's going to be worth it. That's just my personal opinion. If you can't go from a Sunday night until a Saturday morning, I don't know if you're going to get your money's worth. I think you're going to be throwing good money at bad if you can't at least spend one day in each of the theme parks. One full day in the theme parks with a rest day, I think is basically the minimum that I would do where I would feel like it was worth the expense of getting to Walt Disney World.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, especially if you're like me and you're coming from the opposite coast, you don't want to plan to be there for like 3 days. It's a long trip to get over there. It's when you're used to Disneyland, if you're not used to the Disney World transportation system, you spend a lot of time waiting. And if you're not aware of that, you'll get there and you're like, all right, we have 3 days. And then you spend very little of that time having experiences besides waiting for a bus. So I agree that I think you should spend at least a week. I mean, my family usually goes, historically, we leave on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday because the flights are less expensive. And then we come back on like a Thursday. And so we always go midweek, so it's not as expensive to fly out there. If you do live closer and you go more often, I could see staying a little bit less time because you don't have to travel as far. But ultimately, I'd say you need at least a week.
That's a great point you make, Sarah, because we are definitely going to be talking about people who do not go very often. This is going to be every couple of years, maybe every year, but even then, you can miss some things that would normally be very important to you. But if you go every few years, you kind of want to hit all of the important things to you. And that's why I say at least 4 days in the theme parks with a rest day. That would just be what I would say is the minimum to get a really, really solid Walt Disney World vacation out of it. Now that's going to bring up another important topic, and that is the Park Hopper ticket. The Park Hopper ticket adds a lot of money to each day that you are going to be going to a Walt Disney World theme park. However, it definitely maximizes the value of that ticket. Let's say you're doing that 4-day trip that we mentioned earlier. There are 4 parks: Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Disney's Hollywood Studios, and Disney's Animal Kingdom. If you have 4 park days and you don't have the Park Hopper ticket and you want to do all 4 parks, then that means Magic Kingdom, Cinderella Castle is either probably going to be the first thing you do and then you're done with that park for the rest of your vacation, or that you're going to do it at the end and you don't get that picture in front of Cinderella Castle until like the last day of your vacation. Those are some important things to consider. You want to think about that vibe that you're having when you are on vacation. Another thing you could consider is maybe instead of doing 4 days of park hopper tickets, you do 5 days of one park per day and you don't stay all day at every park. That's something that you could consider as well. Sarah, when you travel across the country and go to Walt Disney World, I'm going to assume you always do the park hopper, right?
Yes, we always do the park hopper. That is correct. We actually will sit down before we go and we have a chart thing. We don't plan everything out, but what we'll do is we'll pick, okay, the first day we're going to do this park and this park. The next day. So we never do more than 2 parks in a day because we'll do one in the morning, take a break, and then do one in the afternoon, evening. So we do that for all the days that we're there. And then we have an extra day that we plan if we're going to go do anything else in the Orlando area versus just staying on Disney property. So we definitely make sure that that way we can go back if we want to go back to another park. Like you said, if you only have the one day at Magic Kingdom, but let's say your kids are with you or you and your friends or you and your family are like, oh, I really want to go do this ride again. And you only have that one day, it can be a bummer to be like, well, we already did that. Sorry. So yeah, so we always try and budget that in to make sure that we can go back to any of the parks whenever we choose to.
I am very frugal, Sarah. I know you're also very frugal. We literally had an episode a few weeks ago where we talked about free things to do at Walt Disney World and Disneyland. So we're not telling people to waste money. We do legitimately think that when you are on a vacation, a park hopper ticket is worth it. Now, if you can't afford a park hopper ticket and you can only make it work by getting 4 one park per day tickets, obviously take the vacation. We want you to have these experiences. We're just trying to build the optimal vacation for both value and getting things accomplished.
Oh, I have a question for you though, as a former travel agent. So is it possible for people, like let's say you're there 5 days, can you get 4 days of single day and buy a 1 day hopper pass as like part of that? Or is that something you'd have to break up and do separately?
You cannot do that.
Okay.
You wouldn't even be able to break it up and do it separately.
So you can't buy like as your package, you get 4 single park passes and then you buy separately a 1 day park hopper. You can't do that?
You cannot do that as part of your package. Can somebody maybe trick the system a little bit? Possibly, but that's actually going to lead into the next topic, because where that's going to get you if you try to do something funky like that is you might end up dealing with the park pass reservation system. And it's a good time to move on to that discussion, because once you purchase your tickets, let's say you decide you want to do a 4-day park hopper at Walt Disney World, you are going to then have to make your park pass reservations and pick which park you are going to start off for the day. Now, if there is still availability left at another park, you can change this after you've made the reservation, but it's always good to at least get a park booked right away, just so you can make sure that you're getting to experience every park you want to visit. So your first park for the day is going to be the one that you reserve with your Disney Park Pass. You do it on the My Disney Experience app, and then you can't park hop at Walt Disney World until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That is when you will be able to get into your second park of the day. So that's also something to keep in mind, but remember to make those park pass reservations.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one thing that I know for my family is actually really good that you can't hop till 2, because we take a break anyway, and we usually aren't heading back to whatever going to the next park until around then anyway. So, I mean, for my family, that's awesome because we're like, okay, great. We can focus on our one park. But I do know there are a lot of people out there who like to hop, 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 hop. So, but yeah, it's definitely a good idea. Like even in Disneyland, what time could we hop at Disneyland? Like 1?
It was 1 o'clock at Disneyland.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a little earlier, but I think the hop time for me, it works great, but for others it may not. But definitely same with your reservations. Make sure you make your reservations right away when you can. and keep note of the time you can go to your next park.
I really think the only people who are bothered by the 2 o'clock park hop time are people like me who go a lot, and maybe they couldn't make a park pass reservation for Hollywood Studios on a particular day, but they want to get over there for some type of event that's happening. So they make an Epcot reservation and then they try to hop over. And that's basically why Disney has implemented that 2 o'clock park hop time, I believe. So I know a lot of people get really angry about it or they really like it. I'm more of the mindset that this is just how life is right now. So let's plan out the best possible vacation with the current situation. So when we're talking about park hopping, we are definitely talking about maximizing the time you have on property in the theme parks. So that is going to lead to something that I think is very important, especially if you are planning your first vacation to these theme parks. Remember, you can't do everything. You are going to plan out so much stuff in your mind. You might have those spreadsheets like Sarah talked about earlier. You are not going to get everything done on your spreadsheets. It is just too hard to accomplish everything. I have been going to Walt Disney World since I was 5 years old. I have been an annual pass holder now for over 3 years, about 3.5 years. I am in my 40s. If you were to ask me how long it took for me to do everything at Walt Disney World, I'll tell you when it happens because I still am not even close. What you want to do is temper expectations. You want to do the things that are really, really important to you and do them first. Don't say, I want to save this thing for the last day. It could be the memorable thing. I want to save Haunted Mansion to be the last ride that I ride for my vacation, and it's the first time we ride it on the trip, because then Haunted Mansion is down and you don't get the chance to ride it. There are so many variables that you want to know what your priorities are and do those first.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing we don't talk about a lot on this podcast is the water parks. So if you have a family who's really into water parks, make sure you remember those are there because there are water parks. And so if you are wanting to add that onto your vacation, that when you're planning your park days that you squeeze that in there. I mean, for my family, the last time we went, one of the big things was my family, I have a family of golfers, and we really wanted to see at least one of the golf courses. So we made sure that it was like, okay, we know that the parks are great and all of this and that we want to ride all these rides, but we really want to remember to make time to get out there and actually see the golf courses and the pro shops and things like that. So make sure you do make a note of that and don't put it as an afterthought of, like Rick said, at the end of our trip will be this magic thing, because it's a vacation. It's life. Nothing is going to happen exactly as you want it to, as much as we want that to happen. So make sure you really do get done the things that you want, especially right away. And then you can come back to it later and see if it's there again.
And that's another great point. There are water parks, there's mini golf, there's regular size golf, there's Disney Springs. A lot of people love to resort hop, just go to the different resort hotels and see all the things they have to offer. If you're planning on doing those things, that's time you have to budget. If you give yourself the quote unquote off day and you say, oh, we want to go to the pool at our hotel, and then we want to do one of the water parks, and we want to do Disney Springs, and I think I'd like to see the Contemporary Resort and the Polynesian Resort, and then head over to the Boardwalk Resort. That's 4 days worth of activities, and you're trying to throw them into your quote-unquote off day. You have to remember that everything is going to take longer than you think, especially if you're there for the first time. If you've been there a few times, you start to get an idea of how long you have to budget for these things. But you will be surprised how long it takes to get around property.
Like my first visit as an adult, as a child, it was totally different because it was like the 90s. But as an adult, absolutely, I had no idea. I had no idea about everything. I mean, Rick and I had a conversation a while back that he was just like, Oh my gosh, you haven't been to all the resorts, all the stuff. Because in my mind, I don't think about in the few days that I have there that I'm going to go resort hop or I'm going to do a monorail bar crawl or I'm going to do all these other things. So it's like, well, I've done all these things in the parks because our goal as a family is that we want to get in as much park time as possible. Where for other families, they, like your family, may not be where you want to spend so much time in the parks. So it's definitely a really good idea to sit down and be like, okay, I want to do this. There's a lot of great resources online now as well, where you can kind of talk to other people and be like, hey, you go 3 times a week. Tell me what is the best way to get from this place to this place? Because I know we always rely on bus transportation. We've never used any other transportation because we just never looked into it. So it's use your resources. And if you're using a travel agent, a lot of them can give you some great resources as well of other ways to get around that may be slightly quicker, but just know you are going to spend a lot of time on the move.
So you make so many good points, Sarah, that I'm actually thinking of going in two different directions now to follow up that last sentence. First of all, I'm going to say yes, as a former travel agent, and I no longer am a travel agent for anybody who is wondering. The last time we had this conversation, I was definitely pushing get a travel agent, get a travel agent, get a travel agent. I am not a travel agent anymore. I am still pushing get a travel agent, get a travel agent.
Yes.
They are free to you if they are reputable. And it's always good to have more people trying to troubleshoot any potential problems that may happen. If you have to call Disney and be on hold for 3 hours, wouldn't you rather the travel agent be on hold for 3 hours than you be on hold for 3 hours? You can do as much of the planning or as little of the planning as you want, but a travel agent is basically like just having one more person on your team to help you make those decisions. But you can also listen to this podcast and you will learn all of the things you need to know about going to any of these destinations. Now, talking about transportation brings us to another really important aspect of the planning process. Are you staying on Walt Disney World property or are you going to stay off property? I would say even more than the park hopper ticket decision, this is going to affect your bottom line more than any other decision you are going to make on your vacation. It is going to cost you more to stay on Walt Disney World property than off property. Yes, Disney has the value resorts, All-Star Sports, All-Star Music, All-Star Movies. They even have Pop Century, which is going to be a little more than those other ones. And Art of Animation is technically a value resort as well, and that's going to cost you even more than Pop Century. Art of Animation and Pop are on the Disney Skyliner. That's why they cost a little bit more. But then you're going to have your moderate resorts, which are going to be another price point. And of course, the deluxe, which are only for the richest of the rich of our Disney fans. But maybe that is something that is important to you. The deluxe resorts, for the most part, except for like Saratoga Springs and Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge, are really, really close to theme parks. At least one theme park. For the Epcot resorts, it's actually two theme parks because they're also really close to Disney's Hollywood Studios. You're definitely going to be in a fancier place when you get a deluxe, and you're probably going to be closer to the theme parks. But is that worth $700 a night, $800 a night? That might not be worth it to you. Staying at one of the value resorts will put you in the Disney bubble. You can stay at All-Star Movies and take the buses to all of the theme parks and back from all of the theme parks every day. You can take the bus to Disney Springs. You can take the bus to the theme parks and then go over to some of the other resorts, and you never have to use outside transportation. But to stay at All-Star Movies, you're going to be paying more money than some fancier off-property hotels. And those are just decisions you have to make for what's best for your family. What do you think, Sarah? Where do you think is the value in staying on property as opposed to staying off property?
To be honest, I've never stayed off property at Walt Disney World just because when we went, it was much more affordable. So right now it feels like looking at the prices, a value resort is about what we paid for a moderate last time I was there. And the reason we stayed on property is because it was so much easier to be able to get to the parks and get back to our hotel without having to maneuver so many different ways. I don't know how at Disney World, the off property, I know there's a lot of hotels in the Disney Springs area that I've talked to people who've stayed there and they were really happy with that because they could just walk over to Disney Springs and hop on the transportation and then hop back, and it was very convenient for them. But I'm not sure exactly, how, if I stayed off property there, how transportation would be. Like, is there going to be a shuttle? That's one things you have to think about. Is there going to be a shuttle from my hotel, depending on how far away I am, that's going to take me to property? Is it something where I can walk? At Disneyland, it's a lot easier to make that decision because the last few times we've been, when I was there with Rick and Courtney and I was there with my husband, we stayed off property because it literally is a 5-minute walk across the street, like where me and my husband stayed. Where my friend and her family are staying, it's like a 6-minute walk across the street. So you don't even have to think about that. But in Disney World, you have to think about how, from my hotel, is it worth paying more to have more convenient transportation and more transportation options? Or do I want to save that money and maybe be spending a little bit more time and effort in trying to get to the theme parks? So that's kind of where you have to balance it. And for my family, we definitely, for our next trip, when we eventually go, is we've really been talking about, okay, do we stay off property this time? Because we're getting a little priced out of the Disney bubble. Is it where we look outside of that and think, oh, if we stay close enough to the Disney bubble, we'll still be, because Good Neighbor hotels give you a lot of cool perks that you can get with a Disney hotel, just not all of them.
So back in May, my wife Courtney and I stayed at one of those Disney Springs resorts that are on Walt Disney World property, but aren't Walt Disney World hotels. And we were right by Disney Springs. There was literally a walking bridge over the road that would take you right to Disney Springs. So you would have access to the Disney Springs transportation. But this is an important note. You cannot get a bus from Disney Springs to a theme park or from a theme park to Disney Springs. So you just have to keep that in mind. I know some people know the workarounds. We never tell you how to cheat the system. Yes, there are ways to do it, but we don't talk about cheating the system. We talk about doing things the way they were intended to be executed. But you can get to some of the Walt Disney World bus transportation from Disney Springs. And our resort did have a shuttle, but we didn't even try that shuttle because as people who are somewhat local, we live about 2 hours away from the theme parks. We drove anyway, so we had our car with us and we were paying to park at the resort, so we may as well drive to the parks every day because as annual pass holders, we have free parking at the parks. But all of those things are things to keep in mind. You will save a ton of money. We stayed right next to Disney Springs. We stayed within walking distance of Saratoga Springs, which was probably hundreds of dollars more per night. And we were basically within walking distance of it, and we were paying less than we would pay at Pop Century.
Yeah, from what I've looked at, there are some pretty good priced Good Neighbor hotels that are around the area. So do your research, but also do your research on transportation because, like Rick said, they are somewhat local. So they had their car, but then if they weren't annual pass holders, they would have to pay for parking. So that's another expense that you're adding onto your vacation. So yeah, it's something you really got to think about. And then, of course, talk to your hotel or have your travel agent, if you use one, talk to your hotel. What options do they have? And I know Uber, a lot of people use Uber, another expense, of course. And I don't know how much Uber costs in that area. Around here, it can be pretty pricey. So, but yeah, so it's just things you got to sit down, think about, map out. It's not, you're just going to one theme park and it's super easy to be like, we're going to go, we're going to park, we're going to get out, and we're going to go like do our thing and leave. And communicate with everybody around you that may be helping influence these choices in your vacation.
There are literally people whose job it is in the Orlando area is every day they just drive to Walt Disney World property and Uber people around. Like, that is their job. That is what they do
Wow.
for a living. And some of them are really, really good at it because they learn all the history, all the general knowledge, and they can just make that money. Even though Disney provides free transportation, sometimes you just don't want to wait for that bus. Sometimes it is more economically beneficial for you to pay the money to get to your next theme park earlier than to wait for that bus to take you. Sarah, we're going to talk a little bit more about a different type of transportation when we restart this conversation next week in our next episode. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm excited to come back and talk about more vacation planning.
This has been episode 79 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Please consider going to casapinellas.org/walkwithrick/ to donate in the fight against domestic violence by Monday in honor of my late grandfather's upcoming 100th birthday. My pilgrimage in Ireland is so tied up in my admiration for him that I would love to add another $100 to CASA through our fundraising link by his birthday on Monday. Sarah says we'll be back next Thursday for episode 80 when we finish our discussion on starting the planning process for a Walt Disney World vacation. Until then, have a great week.